Hello and welcome back. On Monday, I shared with you Maggie's story. Maggie, who walked into a 140-person departmental Zoom meeting feeling like a tennis ball was bouncing around in her stomach and walked out being told she was the calmest person in the room. Today, we're getting into why that worked by exploring the science. Welcome back to Unshakable Her, helping ambitious women who are constantly second-guessing themselves to build the daily habits that compound into unshakable confidence. I'm Caroline Esterson and I'm in your corner. Today it's Wednesday, which means it's time for the science of what's holding you back. Because frankly, just believing yourself isn't going to get you the promotion, the pay rise, or the influence. But understanding what's actually happening in your head and why turns what's wrong with me into, that's what's happening. That's how unshakable confidence gets built. Let's go. 3 things you'll have when this episode is done. 1, you'll understand the one fact about the nervous system that explains why some leaders steady a whole room without saying a single inspiring word. 2, you'll know exactly which 2 physical things to do before you walk into a tough meeting and what they're actually doing to your body chemistry. One of them is shockingly simple. And 3, you'll know why performing calm isn't faking it, and the 2-way feedback loop that means the act of leading the calm in the room is the same act that gets you there by the end. Let's get into it. The science bit, because facts beat fear every time. There's a thing called co-regulation. Stephen Porges, an American neuroscientist, has spent 40 years working on something called polyvagal theory. And the headline of it for our purposes is this: human nervous systems are not designed to regulate alone. They're designed to regulate off each other. And the translation is this: when you walk into a room, your brain and your body is reading every other body in the room in milliseconds for cues about whether it's safe to relax. Are people's faces soft or is their jaw locked? Is their breathing slow or shallow? Is the voice slow and steady or high and clipped? You don't decide to scan for this. Your nervous system does it for you before your conscious brain has even noticed there's a meeting. Now, most people in the meeting are doing this at the same time, including you, which means the nervous system in the room with the most steady cues becomes the one everyone else unconsciously regulates towards. It's like they borrow it from you. And here's what it looks like in real life. Have you ever been on a plane with a screaming baby? Yeah, we all have. And you've watched what happens, but you unconsciously observe it on 2 levels. Level 1 is between the baby and the parent. If the parent is panicking, eyes darting, voice tight, jiggling the baby too fast, the baby cries harder every time. But if the parent settles, slows their breathing, drops the shoulders, talks slow and steady, the baby within about 90 seconds settles too. The baby hasn't understood a single word that's been uttered. The baby, after all, is only 2 months old. But the baby is reading the parent's nervous system like a barcode and matching it. Then on level 2, this is the bit that most people miss. Watch what's happening in the seats around them. If the parent is panicking, the whole row tightens up. People glance over, sigh, shift in their seats. The carriage gets brittle. But if the parent is steady, even with the baby still wailing, everyone else stays soft and calm. They go back to their books. Someone might smile sympathetically at the parent. The baby is making exactly the same noise, but the room is having a completely different experience of it. That is co-regulation in 2 directions at once. The parent is steadying the baby, and the parent is also steadying the entire cabin without saying a single word to anyone. Now hold that picture, because that's exactly what happens every time you walk into a room as the most senior person in it. Your team is the cabin. The hard thing on the agenda, it's the baby crying. And whether the room stays soft or goes brittle is a function of what your nervous system is broadcasting in the silence between the words. Adults in work do exactly the same thing as those passengers. We've just got better at hiding it. This is what was happening in Maggie's departmental Zoom meeting. 140 people unconsciously scanning her face, her breath, her pace, her nervous system, by deliberate choreography, was sending out, "It's safe to think here." And theirs answered, "Okay then, we'll come down off the ceiling." That's not a metaphor, it's a measurable biological event. Heart rate variably shifts, breathing slows, and the vagus nerve, which runs from your brainstem down through your face, your throat, your heart, your gut, moves out of fight or flight and into what Porges calls the ventral vagal state, which is the only state in which thinking, problem solving, and connection are actually possible. So when you lead with calm, what you are literally doing is broadcasting cues for other people's vagus nerves to recognize as safety, and their physiology shifts accordingly. Now, here's where it gets super interesting. There's a second mechanism running underneath all of this, and it has a name straight out of a sci-fi film: mirror neurons. Ooh! In the early 90s, researchers Hatfield, Cacioppo, and Rapson described something they called primitive emotional contagion. The short version: humans involuntarily imitate the facial expressions, postures, and vocal patterns of the people around them. And the imitation isn't just visual, it triggers the corresponding emotional state in the imitator, which means, and stay with me a little bit here, this is the most important bit. When you walk into a room frazzled, you are not just feeling frazzled. You are giving everyone in that room a small dose of frazzle. Their faces tighten, their breathing shallows, their nervous systems shift up the threat ladder, and then they think the meeting is stressful. When actually, you brought the stress in with you and handed it around. The reverse is also true. When you walk in with soft jaw, slow breath, you hand that around too. People mirror it, and about 90 seconds in, the room is measurably, physiologically calmer than it was when you arrived. This is the borrowed nervous system, and it's the actual reason senior leaders who lead well are paid what they're paid, not because they have all the answers, because they study the rooms they walk into, which lets everyone else in those rooms do their actual jobs. Here's the bit that's beautifully unfair in your favour. The signals are tiny. We're talking a slower exhale than your inhale, a jaw that isn't clenched, a voice pitched a tone or two lower than feels natural, hands visible and still, a pause of 2 seconds before you respond to a question. These are not big leadership presence things. They're not charisma and they're not personality. These are 6 or 7 physical micro cues, every one of which can be practiced in private in front of a mirror before a hard meeting. And every single one of them changes other people's biology. That's the 2 millimeter difference. Tiny moves with whole room consequences. And this is the really good bit. These cues also rewrite your own biology in the same direction. There's a thing called embodied cognition. Roughly, the body and brain run a 2-way feedback loop. When you act calm, your body produces calm signals back. Slow exhale activates your vagus nerve. Relaxed jaw signals safety to your own brainstem. Open posture lowers cortisol over a couple of minutes. Translation: performing calm actually does make you calmer, which means the act of leading the calm into the room is also the thing that lets you actually feel it by the end. This is the Maggie effect. She didn't feel calm walking in. She did feel calm walking out. Not because the situation got less stressful. Boy, it didn't. But because she'd been consciously performing calm physiology for 23 minutes and her own body had caught up. And the more you practice this, the more automatic it becomes for every tough situation you might face as you develop in your career, from interviews and difficult conversations right the way through to the big meetings and big moments. Not the club, just bad processes. The system's the problem, not you. Let's fix it for you and the next one in. Now, we've talked about some personal things. Let's name the systemic thing, because the failure I'm about to describe is one I see in nearly every organisation I work with, and it has a name. Organisations are obsessed with the message they want to send and completely forget about the audience who has to hear it. They'll spend 3 weeks on a deck and 3 minutes on the room, preparing what to say, not for who has to hear it. And then, when the meeting falls apart, they blame the person at the front instead of the system that sent them in. So the system never gets improved. Let me show you what I mean. I sat in a meeting recently. It was a new performance review system being rolled out across the company. The audience was every manager in the business, the people who'd actually be running the reviews. So, it was a high stakes room. People walked in already suspicious. That could have been anticipated, already looking for what's wrong. Because that is what people do when somebody changes the rules of how they're going to be judged. That response was completely predictable, and it should have been planned for. The person sent in to deliver it was the HR lead, sent in with slides, no briefing on the how, no anticipation of the questions, and no script for the difficult bits. Nobody had thought about the audience, only about the message they wanted to send. So, understandably, he walked in a bit nervous. The room read the nervousness and people got even tighter. The questions got sharper and his answers got shorter. The deck got rushed. He started to skip over slides. And by about minute 15, the meeting was on fire. People talking over him, side chats. The whole point of the rollout, getting buy-in from the managers who would run the new system, was being actively destroyed in real time. And then the L&D lead, who was sat quietly in the corner, not technically running the session, well, she stood up slowly and walked to the front. The room fell quiet. And in the calmest possible voice, she said, "It's clear you've all got concerns. That's understandable. It's a big change. We're here to work through them practically together. So let's get them all on the table and figure out how we tackle them so that you can present these changes calmly to your own teams." You could see it, the room, visibly relaxed. It was much less combative, much more collaborative. The meeting was salvaged by one person sitting quietly in the corner who had the choreography in her body because she practiced it for 10 years. Now, here's the systemic thing. The meeting had a perfect deck. It was logically sequenced, brand compliant, been signed off, legally reviewed. And despite all of that, it was still useless because nobody anywhere in the chain had asked the audience question. The audience question is this: who is in the room? What are they going to feel walking in? What will they be suspicious of? And what will they need to hear in the first 90 seconds? And what does the person at the front have to be for them to stay in the room with us? That isn't a question slides answer. That's a question that comes before the slides, and it falls between the cracks of comms, HR, L&D, and the line leader. So it just doesn't get asked. And then we send people into rooms unprepared and call it a leadership failure when it falls apart. It's not a leadership failure. It's a thinking failure. The organisation was in output mode when it should have been in audience mode. Output mode asks, what do we need to tell them? Audience mode asks, what do they need to hear? In what order? From whom? In what tone? To actually be able to use this information on Monday. Different question, different preparation, same content and completely different outcome. The L&D lead in that meeting did the audience mode question on the fly in the corner in real time. They're feeling judged. They need to feel like collaborators. So I'll put the concerns on the table and frame us as solving this together. 30 seconds of audience mode thinking saved a meeting that 3 weeks of output mode preparation had nearly destroyed. And here is the cultural quote that runs output mode. The sentence that lets organisations stay in it without ever questioning it. Let's just get the message out. You've heard it probably this week, the most innocent sounding sentence in any comms meeting and the alibi for every badly landed change announcement in corporate history. Let's just get the message out, as if the message is a parcel, as if the audience is a postbox, as if delivery is the only variable. We're retiring it right now and replacing it with, Who's in the room and what do they need from us? Same meeting, same content, different question at the start leads to a completely different outcome. So here's the question for your week. The next time you're in a meeting, planning a piece of internal comms or being asked to deliver one, ask calmly the question that breaks the spell of output mode. Before we do, who's the audience and what do they need from us? And if you're the person being sent into the room and nobody else has asked it, ask it for yourself. Take 20 minutes before the meeting and answer it on a post-it note. That isn't extra work. That is the work. That is leadership. So, what do you take away from today? Well, this is what I hope you've taken away. Firstly, that co-regulation is real. The steadiest nervous system in the room becomes the one everyone else borrows. 2, mirror neurons mean that you're handing your internal state out to the room, whether you want to or not. So you might as well hand them something useful, frankly. 3, embodied cognition runs both ways. Performed calm produces felt calm in a few minutes. So the act of leading it into the room is also the act of getting yourself there. Which is why none of this, not the choreography, not the audience question, not the slow exhale before you click admit all, is extra. It is not on top of your day job. It is not what you do once the proper work is done. It is the proper work. Because leadership in the end is a single job, helping other people do their best thinking in the room you're in together. And the deck doesn't do that. The agenda doesn't do that. You do, with your state, your preparation, and the choreography you brought in with you. That's the neuroscience. It is rock solid. And it means the next time someone says to you, you're just naturally one of those calm people, you can smile, take it as the compliment that it is, and quietly know that what you're doing is a trained skill, not a personality trait, which means anyone, including you, can teach themselves to do it. So on Friday, we're closing the loop. Friday is the song episode, and I've got 3 moves for the turbulent week. 3 actual moves, the kind you can do tomorrow without a single book, course, or coach. One of them is so small, you think it can't possibly count, but it does. Friday morning, see you there. That's it for today. Before you go, if something in this episode made you think, that's why I do that, hit follow wherever you're listening, because that moment of recognition, that's where Unshakable starts. Remember, I'm in your corner. See you Friday.